My name is Melanie Harwood, and I am introducing you to Fiona Cowan. Fiona is a head teacher with more than 20 years experience. She builds the most amazing programs, lesson plans, develops projects and new ways of teaching and inset training. And I've been very, very lucky to work with Fiona on quite a few projects now that I'm not going to name right now, but if anybody knows it in education for early years and primary, Fiona's the first person that I call. So I don't always like what she says, but she's straight as a die if she knows exactly what she's going to say. So I'm going to hand over to Fiona Cowan, who's going to introduce herself to us and take it away. Here we go.
Thank you, Mel, for that introduction. Now, to most of you, it won't seem very strange for me to be sitting in my kitchen delivering this, because this is our new way of working. We're so used to, in the last few months, working from home, sitting in our kitchens, our studies, our lounges, and delivering presentations. Head teachers across the country and teachers have been doing this for the last 4 or 5 months, and it has become our new normal. And so it's not strange to see me sitting in my kitchen. But I didn't want you to have to sit looking at me in my kitchen for the whole presentation. So I have just got a presentation. So I'm just going to share my screen with you, if that's okay. I'm hoping you can all see that perfectly. And there we go. Okay, so when I spoke to Mel, she asked me to be part of this recovery summit. And obviously for most head teachers, practicing teachers, we've been dealing with recovery for the last few weeks and months. But firstly, I just wanted to clarify a number of things, and head teachers that are listening will completely understand what I'm saying. But firstly, our vocabulary, as I'm speaking, we will be talking about our school being partially closed rather than closed, because at no point did my school close. It closed on the Friday when the government said that the schools in England would close, and on the Monday it opened, and it had been completely reinvented over the weekend. Never before had we worked in this way, never before have we delivered education from home, but we did. And so we're very clear with people that never at any point was my school closed. It was always partially closed, and it partially opened on June 1st when we received a number more children. Over the period of March, April and May, we were delivering education to children whose parents needed to work, who were key workers, and a number of children who needed school the most. On June the 1st, those numbers rose exponentially, really. We went from maybe 40 children to over 100 because we had a lot more people, key workers, returning to work and having to actually attend work. And we also had a lot of children that were really struggling. And so from June the 1st, we took in 100 children. And that's about a third of our school, because on September the 1st, we will reopen our school completely to about 300 children. Our school is an infant school. We deliver education for children from 3 to 7, and we work closely with the juniors next door, who delivers education from 7 to 11. And I say particularly about delivering education because although the children in our school are extremely well cared for, we are not childcare providers. We are an educational establishment delivering education to children. So this whole new world of COVID brought lots of things that we needed to deal with and we need to look at. So our journey through COVID was absolutely harrowing, like most schools. And it was a really testing time. As Mal said, 20 years in education, became a head teacher at 27, which was stressful enough. But the last 6 months have been the most stressful of my career. But the one thing we have learned through COVID is about relationships, and the fact that relationships and compassion and kindness are the things that are really important to our school. So we spent the first few weeks, as everybody did, scrambling to find a new way of working, and soon decided that we can't continue like this. We cannot run our school day to day, week to week, just waiting to see what the government was telling us we were needing to do next. So, as we do very well, we started a plan, and we call our plan Raising Hope, and it was our pathway back to a new normal. and we will talk about that in a little while and how that worked. So Mel asked me to talk to you today about how we nurtured our community to deliver our recovery curriculum, what we did, how we did it, what the results were, and how we're moving into blended learning in September, and how we created lesson plans and conversations and talked to young people to enable them to recover from the situation. Now I have this morning looked at some of the discussions that have gone on around peace and comparing the situation of COVID to war-torn countries and how people have recovered from those traumas, and that's where we started first. So very early on in through the COVID situation, there was a think piece that came out from Cambridge University Press, Oxford Brookes, by two professors, Barry Carpenter and his son Matthew Carpenter, who works in a school in Kidderminster, and they talked about the pathway to recovery, and they talked about the 5 levers that were really important in order for children to sort of mend from COVID, really. Because the big thing was about relationships, it was about community, it was about a curriculum that people understood and could talk about. It was about children knowing how to learn, and about them to have a space to be able to rediscover themselves and their voice within their learning. And we used the think piece, and if anybody wants to, they can see that if you look at if you just Google recovery curriculum, it's the first thing that comes up, and it's something that really impacted on the way that we thought and dealt with where we went with COVID. One of the things as a school that we have always believed in is being attachment aware, and so as a school we are an attachment aware school and use lots of the trauma-based practice in order to inform how we work with children, and that was really key to some of the recovery and the pathway that we designed, in that what we could see in the children was some of the impacts of trauma on them. Obviously for lots of children there was lots of things around loss and bereavement, and those things needed to be recognised, the loss of routine, the loss of community, the loss of social interactions, but we were seeing an impact of this on children, on their physical health, on their emotions, on the relationships, on their behaviour, and we knew that actually what we needed to do was to take a trauma-informed approach to supporting our children. So we talked about, as a school and as a staff, we had a number of Zoom meetings talking about, you know, what we felt was important for our children and for our families. And we have always believed that communication is key, and the better that you communicate with parents and keep them informed and keep them up to date and talk to them about what needs to happen in order to support their children, the better you do. And that's about keeping children and parents connected with the school. And for the teachers, we found that actually all of our teachers, in particular the ones that were socially distancing, the ones that weren't leaving their home, the connection with school for the staff, never mind the children, was really important. And we worked really hard on that and believed that if we communicated well and kept people connected to school, we could really support them. But also that we took a compassionate sort of approach to things. So as a school, we wanted to recognise that people were, everybody's experience of the COVID situation, lockdown, would be different. We had children who both their parents worked for the NHS and were spending a lot of time at work. We had some parents who had been furloughed, we had people who'd been made redundant, we had families that were on 0-hour contracts, so everybody will have experienced things differently. So we had some families who had a fabulous experience through COVID because they slowed down, they were able to connect with their children and spend time in a world that normally moved at 1,000,000 miles an hour. For some families, the COVID experience was really positive. But for the majority, it was a very difficult situation. And it was making sure that we were compassionate to all of those situations. So what we wanted to make sure that we knew very clearly what we valued in our response. So we called our response Raising Hope. And what we wanted to do was help raise children with big hearts and big minds. And so we kind of identified what we thought was really important. And as I say, we wanted families to feel connected, we wanted staff and children to feel safe and to be prioritised, because safe, our children were safe, and if our children were safe, our families were safe. We wanted to guide the communities around wellbeing. We'd already done quite a lot of work as a school around wellbeing, but we wanted to make sure that that was the focus of what we were doing, to make sure that people were emotionally supported. And we knew that we were going to have to rebuild our school with a focus on learning. And so we wanted to make sure that there was some clarity around what we did. And we knew that there was an opportunity here to review the future of our school and where we go. So what we did is we wrote some guiding principles. So we believed that everything we did from that point forward in relation to COVID was about these guiding principles, that the safety of staff and the children come first, that we take loco parentis seriously and we wouldn't ask anything of other people's children, that we wouldn't ask of ourselves and our own children, and that we were comfortable with what we were asking parents to do with their children, and that we would be happy to do that ourselves. We talked about communication and especially listening. We spent a lot of time listening to parents, listening to children, and communicating with them, which wasn't easy when everybody's in a different home. We liaise with our junior schools and our local providers, and in particular the cluster schools around us, and our local authority. They all became our priority. It was about listening to what other people were doing, listening to what other people were needing, and responding to that. We responded to the needs of our school and ensured our plan suited our stakeholders. So we never did anything just because. It was always around, what do our stakeholders need, and why are we doing what we're doing. We prioritised those that needed us the most, and that's not to say that some families didn't interact with, but we categorised all our families in terms of, some people needed some emotional support, some needed academic support, some needed practical help. But alongside our pastoral team, myself as the head teacher and our teaching staff, we were able to look at, who really needed us the most, who needed academic support, who needed more pastoral support. And with everything we do as a school, we felt that it needed to be family orientated. It wasn't just about helping in our care, it was about helping the families that we support, because if we help the family, we help the child. So we connected with parents, we communicated with them every step of the way, and we showed them compassion. So in doing that, what we created was our 6 R's of response. Now, this process has altered as we've gone through, because at first it started with 3 R's, and as we moved through, we ended up talking and changing things, because at first all we were reacting to the situation. Obviously, COVID kind of hit us. We'd prepared, we had a couple of weeks of preparation before the school partially closed, and we used that time to communicate with staff, to make connections with families, to make sure that they could stay connected with us. And we prioritised safeguarding, the safety of staff, and we did as much as we could to support mental health. After the Easter period, moving into the end of April, beginning of May, we started then to look about how we reset our school, how do we change our structures, how do we risk assess in order to work within this new normal. And that reset happens regularly, on a regular basis, as we introduce new risk assessments, as things change from the government. But that's more about operational working. What was really key to the work that we did was that when we moved into recovery, when we started looking at collecting and gathering theoretical input, we started looking at theories around attachment, theories around trauma, work around trauma-based practice, and started to realise that actually for our children, we were going to have to be bold and create a pedagogy between our school and in our community that ensured that people understood that this is an emotional roller coaster, and it was an emotional roller coaster for us staff, for our children, and for the parents, and that everybody kind of needed to recognise and realise the impact of what was happening to everybody. And I think once people started to recognise and realise that the symptoms and the signs that they were seeing in their own children and themselves, they started to actually understand how important some of the work we started to do was. What we did as a school and as managers is empower our staff. So as I say, a lot of my staff had had a lot of CPD already, and we prioritised that and spent a lot of time emailing information, links, videos to watch. We sent a number of documents out to all of our staff to ensure that we were communicating what we believed and what research tells us about what our children were going to need. And by the time we opened up in June, we were already in a position of rebuilding our ethos as a school. We kind of made a mini school within a school. So we had a sort of 8-week period in June and July where we kind of created this little cocoon of well-being, really, of supporting children. I'm going to go on to talk about that really in a little while in terms of recovery and rebuild. And then we took some time to reflect on how things have gone. Because what we suddenly started to realise when we got to June was that actually we may have to revisit all of these stages again, because actually what COVID's taught us is that we need to embrace change and we need to learn from it, and we need to prepare to move on to the next stages. And so one of the important things was saying, okay, what went well? What do we need to learn from this? And how do we react next time, so that if we go into, you know, a national lockdown or a local lockdown, which, you know, is a possibility as we move into the winter months, we know how we are going to react. And so in sort of July time, we did some work around preparing a blended curriculum, really ready for September and October if we need to go back to the react stage, which, you know, may be a reality. So one of the important things was about nurturing the community, and this has been a long-term project for us, and it needs to be about whole school ethos, we believe. And I don't know if people have heard the saying about a dog's not just for Christmas, it's for life. But for us, working with parents is not just for lockdown, it is for life. And we have worked with parents so hard for so long. And many years ago, I read a piece of research, and I can't unfortunately remember where the research came from, which is a shame. And then if anybody does know, I'd really appreciate knowing. But it identifies 6 ways of working with parents as a school. And those 6 ways were supporting parents with parenting and offering support with, you know, child rearing skills, home conditions and all of those types of things. Working with parents around communicating, which is generally about children's attainment and achievement and their progress. We would work with parents in participating and being involved in the life of the school, whether that be attending things or being part of the Parents and Friends Association or being an audience in something. Working with parents learning at home and home learning, working with the school and parents around decision making and governance and questionnaires, and then collaborating with people, not just parents, but the community in which we work. And those 6 sort of keys have helped us in creating a pathway to work with our parents. What you might not be able to see under this box, I'll just move the box, I'm just moving you down, Melanie, is a wellbeing box. And over the last few years, we added this box around supporting families, children and parents with their wellbeing and their mental health, because it became very clear to us as a school that actually for a lot of our children, the issues that they were showing in school were around parental mental health, leading to children's mental health, and that actually if we could support these parents at a very early stage, then we could stop some of the trauma that may happen to these children and support them in creating a better life. So that when we start to look at improving care for these children and children sort of coming out of issues around trauma, that we can create safe environments with children, we can build relationships and connections, and we can build sort of information and support teaching about emotional regulation if we deal with children's wellbeing and mental health. So as a school, we were well placed really to start looking at the recovery curriculum and teaching children about emotional literacy, because the staff had a lot of CPD already. Lots of this was already part of our general curriculum. So when we started looking at that react stage, when we looked at the first few weeks in terms of how we were going to work with parents, the first thing we did, we looked at how we could stay connected. So we used a free program called Seesaw, where you can communicate with parents and send work backwards and forwards on the platform. We have a closed Facebook page, which is just a phenomenal way of sharing messages with parents. And we also offered paper collections of the work that we were doing. So all children's home learning went out to them on Seesaw. Children sent it back to us because they already knew how to do that, to the teachers, and the teachers commented on it. For those that were unable to do that, they could get that work from Facebook, or they could call at school and get a paper pack, or we had a lot of paper packs delivered to families who were isolating, etc. We have responded to all of our children's work that was submitted, and I think that's some of the comments that I've seen from parents across the country really, is that there was no feedback from the teacher to the children, to the parents. And actually, when you're in a world doing things that you've never done before, you need to know if you're doing it right. And for our parents, we wanted to ensure that they got that feedback. And so sometimes it was just a well done, brilliant work, fabulous. Others, there was feedback back to the parents and to the children, so then they knew they were doing it okay. Our vulnerable families at home had a tiered support plan. So some families were contacted every day, some twice a week, some 3 times a week, and some went from everyday contact to once a week, to once a fortnight. Some parents were only contacted by teachers, some had pastoral support, some just needed a little bit of help. But it was very important that we communicated and we stayed connected. So in terms of free school meals, in the UK, the government offered vouchers. So we made sure the families got their vouchers. We home delivered food parcels. Some of my office staff, my business manager, some of our teaching assistants delivered food parcels to families. We looked for every source of financial support we could, so that we could offer parents. Things like for parents who've been on maternity, we had a number of parents who should have returned back to work after having maternity leave. And for anybody who's taken maternity leave, you know those last few months sometimes can be quite difficult financially. And then not to be able to return to work because you've got a brand new baby, there's no childcare, made for some families a really difficult financial situation. And for us to be able to look for charitable funding and be able to say to parents, you know, just contact us, we'll be able to support you with this, we have got some finances in place, and that meant a lot to a lot of parents. And then supporting parents in accessing the local community services. So we're really lucky in our community. We've got a number of church-led community services, and for us to be able to connect the two together, the people who are vulnerable and needed help and the service, was just immense. But what we knew and we could see was the children were really struggling without the social connections with the other children, and the social connections with the teacher. And so from very early on, every day, one of our members of staff spent the time recording and delivering a bedtime story to the community. And so for a good 2 or 3 months, every child went to bed with a story from one of our families, from one of our teachers, because we knew that, one, some of these children won't be picking up a book, won't be read to, won't be hearing language and vocabulary, but also they just needed that connection time, and the children just loved seeing the adults in school. We did lots of joint ventures with the other schools in our communities. We made scarecrows, we made signs to put up in the window, so when children went on a walk, you know, they could connect. We had competitions. We did a lot of things to ensure that the community stayed connected. As most schools, we did loads of Zoom meetings face-to-face. We spoke to parents and children using Zoom. We sent personal messages. We did sing-alongs. The nursery spent time singing nursery rhymes with each other on Zoom. We did craft activities, and lots of sort of activity where people could see each other face-to-face. We were lucky enough to work with Mel on a project around mini climate readers, which is now called Mini Readers. And we were able to offer all of our family in our community an opportunity to trial some new products, and 100 of our families took that project and thoroughly enjoyed a week-long project, actually a fortnight-long project of working with mini readers. And that was a really lovely sort of opportunity to connect with the world and to think about something other than COVID. We set every week physical challenges for the children to sort of do and keep up with. We had huge VE Day celebrations, videos and challenges and all sorts of things. Our staff loved making a little bit of video compilation, and they made videos, songs, you know, like lots of schools did. And we communicated with children and parents every step of the way, because remember what we said is it's about connection, communication and compassion. So when we started looking at rebuilding the curriculum, which is obviously what we're talking about here, that recovery, we tried to start to work out what the pathway was. And so we started with collecting and gathering the theoretical input. We realised we needed to be bold and have our own sort of understanding. For us as a school, we've always been very clear about, as long as we all understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, and we're doing it our way, we will achieve. And so for us it was really important that we had that shared vision that enabled us all to know what we were doing and why, and that vision was shared with our parents. As I said before, we empowered our staff to ensure that they all had the skills in order to do that, and that's always been important as part of our school improvement projects. Because what we've always wanted to ensure is that the staff knew what they were doing. So whatever project we've done, whether that be handwriting projects or if it's Educcate Global around environmental studies and global citizenship, etc., it's about empowering the staff to support children. We developed a professional communication to our staff, parents, children, our community, and we told everybody what we were doing and why. And then we moved on to curriculum design and how we were going to ensure that that would deliver our catch-up plans to enable children to, you know, make up the time that they've lost, the lost learning, and, you know, sort of, I'd hate the word catch up, but to be able to find out what skills the children were lacking in and enable them to spend some time in the autumn term catching up with that. What we do in order to do that is create a community of support and a network of excellent practice. So we look out there for the schools that are doing it well. We use Facebook, we use Instagram, we use Twitter, we use anything we can in order to create a community that supports our families and our staff. And obviously, as we move along that, it's always evaluated and improved, and we try as best we can to share our practice. So this may look very busy, but this is how our school works. We work in pictures, and we call them sort of learning pathways. Their mind mapping was the origins of this. So originally, last year in 1920, our curriculum statement was about dreaming big. We wanted children to learn to discover the world, to respect, to engage, respect people, obviously, to engage in learning, to be able to use their basic skills and to really to make a difference to the world. And we'd identified 8 key themes that supported that. Obviously, with COVID and the things that happened as part of that, we knew that the curriculum would need to change for next year. So we took into account all of the attachment theories, all the research that was out there, and we began to design a new curriculum, a new beginning really. We knew that we needed to review where we were at. We didn't need to keep churning out the same old stuff. We needed to be responsive to all our stakeholders. We needed to respect the lived experience of those stakeholders, but we needed to ensure that they were resilient and ready to embrace change. And so what we did, as I said, we created our pathway of raising hope, including a Better Pair project, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And as part of that hope, we hoped that children would learn compassion and kindness in order to live content lives with ambition, that children did things because it was what they wanted to do rather than what they had to do. We wanted children to be ambitious in life, but we wanted them to be content. And so those words are the words that sort of have moved us forward in our plan, because we aim children to learn to connect, to be kind, to be curious, to be tolerant, about everybody being equal, and we've spent a lot of time reflecting on those two words, tolerance and equality, as part of our peaceful curriculum. So we talked about our overarching themes in 1920. In 2021, they've had a little bit of a revamp. Some of the wordings changed slightly, but that's what the theme of our curriculum will be. These are some of the things that our school improvement plan will include, including the Better Bear project and Better Bear transition. In sort of mid-autumn term, we're going to take a mental health temperature check. And at that point, if we feel that our children are ready, then we will start looking at academic assessments and catch-up plans, because what's more important for us is children's mental health and well-being. Because what we're hoping to be able to do is to make learning memorable and to support children in all of the learning around, you know, the arts, phonics, reading, writing, physical health, global learning, environmental studies, and learning to learn and metacognition. So all of those things will be part of our blended learning plan, whether that be face-to-face or online learning or a mixture of both. Some of the things we already deliver around Start Bee, Mini Bees, yoga, mini readers, global Educate global initiatives, all of those things are already online. But what we're going to have to do is to learn to deliver those things alongside face-to-face learning. So what we have done is we have designed a recovery curriculum that started in June. And we have already delivered some of our curriculum in June around our Better Bears programme. I'm just looking for that there. So there's the Better Bears programme. In the Better Bear programme, what we have done is started to look at how we can support children's mental health and well-being. And last year, our county council did a project called the Teddy Bear Project that looked at the impact of children sort of having contact with teddy bears and cuddling and holding bears and having something to talk to and building relationships, and how that could be positive for young children's mental health. And so what we have done is use that project as a starting point to teach children emotional literacy, really, and an ability to be able to talk about their own emotions. Because one of the things that we could see was happening was children were struggling to express how they felt because they didn't really have the vocabulary or the understanding. And so parents were sort of saying, you know, what's the matter? And children didn't know. They were either becoming hypo-aroused or hyper-aroused, and nobody really understood what that was or how that was working. So we wanted to ensure that we supported parents with that. And so we created this project called the Better Bears. It was around our Raising Hope curriculum and our recovery curriculum. We started in June and we delivered it to parents and children. We have the Better Project to support transition back in September. There is a video. I'll play that now for you that explains a little bit about the Better Bear Project and how we support children's emotional health during lockdown, as well as when we come back in September.
We have used the Teddy Bear Project at my school. Our teachers thought it would help us coming back to school after lockdown. We call it the Better Bear Project. love my better bear. She's called Honeysuckle. Honeysuckle has helped me when I came back to school. Maybe the Better Bear project could help the children in your settings too.
So then after, as part of that, when we return in September, we wanted to make sure that the children continued that sort of learning. And so what we have developed for the autumn term, before we take that mental health temperature check and look at academic progress, we wanted to make sure that we focused on children's sort of moral and emotional development alongside their sort of spiritual connections. And so we have created connection times where staff will spend some time thinking about some of those important themes alongside our collective worship, which obviously will have to be done in class rather than as part of a whole school. But the staff have got that support to be able to help the children develop, and including our metacognition and our plans around that. So staff have spent a long time working on those things. And that has helped them to, I'm just waiting for the presentation to catch up now, because I think it's trying to start playing the video again. Yeah, so the Better Bear project has then moved into a transition project. So all the children that are coming to attend to our school in September will have already been given a Better Bear and a Better Bear home, and have videos to support them in learning about their emotions and their sort of worries and concerns about starting school, etc. So they have really been able to sort of get to grips with that, and when you watch the video you can see how children have enjoyed it, the families have participated, and being able to work together in order to do that. So, you know, we have worked really hard to make sure that we stay connected with the children and given them the opportunity to start addressing some of the loss that they've experienced as a result of COVID. Starting to understand some of their responses to that around anger and anxiety, and starting to look at that sort of peaceful approach and using mindfulness as a way of dealing with that. And so, you know, as a school, we've worked really hard to ensure that our children do recover from COVID, and that we start to begin to look at the response for September and planning to move forward. So I hope that's pretty clear, Mel, about where we've been and what we've been doing.
You always blow my mind, Fiona. It's brilliant, really superb. Absolutely superb.
We've had some fabulous feedback from families that live in the community. We've prepared children to move on to not only our feeder schools, but to schools within the area who've also picked up the projects. We have seen children return to school in June, expecting the worst and seeing the best.
Fiona, I've got, there's two questions I want to ask of you. So this presentation we will be including below this video on the site, so that anybody taking part in this virtual summit or that has signed up will be able to have a look at your presentation. Can you give us a recommended resources or recommended reading or any research links? We'll add them there. This will be transcribed as well, so that if they want to go through it and make notes, it's all there for them. One thing that I wanted to ask you about the programs you were delivering during lockdown. I remember you calling me and saying, after half term, so you had the children working online, and you said after half term, your engagement fell off a cliff. And you said, how do we get them back on? And that was where we said, okay, let's do a trial. Let's change mini readers. It was called mini climate readers back then. Let's take away the teacher lesson plans and create parent-carer instructions. And that was when we onboarded more than 100 families onto that system. And I just wanted to know how that blended learning use of that program helped you get that engagement back.
So I mean, we'd already started some of the work around the mini readers in school, which I think really helps, because to be able to connect the learning at school and at home is really important, and it's key really that the same messages have happened. And so when we started the project as a school, we ensured that we communicated with parents what we were doing, and we involved our parents, but they kind of were still on the sidelines of that. Whereas I think with parents being able to share the stories that we shared with the children, they understood the content better because they used the information text that were in there to kind of see what we were talking about and why we were doing the things we were doing, which enabled the parents to have a better understanding. And because the parents had a better understanding, they engage with the children better, and the children engage with the stories. I mean, some of the characters that are in the mini readers, you know, they're heroes at our school. Our children talk about them alongside Batman and you know, all the sort of children's comic stuff that they're watching now, because the children engage with the characters. They're real to them. They're part of their, you know, what's been doing. And the children would go home to parents and they didn't know who they were. And I think we've seen a difference in people's sort of conversation around that, particularly for those children that returned in June. Much more interested in sort of the world around them and sort of more scientific sort of STEM stuff, because there were lots of opportunities in there, but also the arts, that, you know, there was the opportunities to sing, to do arts, to do lots of design and technology work. And so it just helped with children who were struggling with accessing some of the literacy and numeracy in particular, and just thrived through those types of things. So enabling children to have that broad and balanced experience of learning, so that you're not sort of only encouraging literacy and numeracy, because I think some schools tend to think that actually more of the same will mean that they're doing better. And actually for some children to give them experiences that can build their confidence and do something that they really enjoy. I think for us as a school, we're quite conscious that we all are very different and we all learn very differently, but actually one's strength can be another's weakness, and we can learn from each other. But also, you know, we're all interested in different things, and different children like to do different things. And, you know, some academic children just don't like to do artwork. Some children love artwork but don't like to read. And it just felt really important through lockdown that actually children continued to learn. It didn't really matter to us what they were learning, because any learning is important, because it's about personal growth. And I think that personal growth attached to that sort of well-being and emotional improvement allows children to develop a sense of self that's positive. And for children who have a positive sense of self, you know, they're more likely to take risks. They're more likely, I mean, positive risks, but they're more likely to succeed because they feel they can. And so we wanted to support families with that. And, you know, the feedback from families has been really positive around the support that were offered, but the opportunities that we sort of recommended for children that were really important to them.
I wanted to ask you where, you know, we're now going to be going into this, because we are going to have other lockdowns. We know that there are going to be school closures. We know that there could be outbreaks. There is no vaccine available. Testing is not done widespreadly enough, and the tracking and tracing, test and trace system has for want of a better word, failed. Blended learning. Everybody's talking about blended learning, but you've said, don't just think that you can give a school an online program, and a parent, a family or a child, an online program, and think they've got to get on with it. Blended learning, you said to me, has to always be delivered, you know, in that triangle, that pyramid form. Head teacher, teaching team, specialist teaching team, teacher, always directly by that team into that household via that learning package. So I'm seeing a lot of companies saying, oh, we're delivering blended learning. And I'm looking at them and I'm saying, that's not blended learning. That's not what I've been told. What I'm seeing, the ones that
traditionally, the thing that happens with schools is they become a business opportunity whereby people, you know, create a program, and for very busy people who are very stressful, to be able to buy a program and deliver it in their school that will answer all their prayers seems like the easy way out. But we've seen this, you know, with literacy development, with reading, with phonics, with maths, that buying of a package and delivery of a package doesn't always, so it may sometimes in the beginning show a huge impact, but later on down the line it has less of an impact, because it's about the commitment of the families and the staff and the people that are delivering it. And so, you know, for us as a school, our ethos has always been around CPD for staff, because the better understanding staff have, the better they can support and deliver that to children. But that staff now includes parents. And this is the difference with, you know, the new normal. Is not only do I need to support my teachers, but my teachers need to support my parents. Because for lots of children, it's about the parents supporting that delivery. And so wherever we can, we try the best we can to offer video support, whether that be a teacher live, a teacher video, or peer-to-peer videos. You know, we try to do that as much as possible so that onus is not on parents, because for poor parents, they've got to be doing their own work, they've got their housework to do, they've got other children to deliver, they may have 3 or 4 children sat around a table at different ages. You know, it's not easy home learning, it's not. And you know, if it was, we wouldn't have schools. We have schools because, you know, that social interaction of education and social interaction together is a really positive way of learning. But they need the support. So, you know, we can offer that online face-to-face with the teachers delivering whole class lessons. We can offer video so that they can replay and replay. We offer a lot of peer-to-peer support. We use a number of programs that offer sort of assessments and individualized programs. And that blend of all of those things has meant that, you know, our children have been well served. That's not to say that some children haven't done any learning, because, you know, that's always going to happen. Lots of it around access to computers and IT and to the internet. It has been a huge issue for us. We're about 25% free school meal children, which means, you know, quite a lot of our children live in poverty, and the access to a computer and Wi-Fi have been a huge issue, and one that we have begun to address, you know, in terms of maybe 2 or 3% of our children, but we've still got a number that won't have access. And that's why I talked about earlier, is those children that need school the most. For some from us, you know, maybe half of our children, they've got internet access and IT equipment, but some children haven't. And so we've made sure that they were the focus of getting into school, as well as, you know, children's safeguarding, etc. So by knowing our families the best, we've provided a better blended learning programme. Now, I'm not saying we've done everything fabulous and we've got the answer to everybody's prayers. We haven't, but what we're doing is evaluating as we go. So we're doing the best we can at the point at which we're at, and communicating all of the time with parents, which means that they understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. So we had very little complaint about those children from those parents whose children didn't get to return to school, because they understood why the ones that were coming did. You know, they've been very understanding about how we're resetting the school and how it's going to work, because we've responded to the parents, we've listened to them compassionately and understood. So a lot of parents talked sort of mid-June about the worries around transition, particularly for our year 2s. There are only 7 who will be leaving us and going to a new school. So they left us in March, haven't been to school since, and will be going back to school in September to a whole new school with all new staff who they don't know. Well, to me, that didn't feel comfortable. Parents were really concerned about that. So we've done a sort of a transition project with our junior school, whereby in September, we're going to come back to school a little bit early and pinch some days from July, next year, and we're going to come back early, and we're going to give the children a chance to come back to us as an infant school first, so that over the summer they've not got to worry about going to a new school. They'll come back to us, we'll introduce them to their new school, to their new teachers, and then they'll start the following week in their new school as a response to parents. But the key for that transition as well is about the new school and the old school understanding and having agreement around what blended learning is and how they're going to continue the work that we've done, making sure that the blended learning we offer is similar to the blended learning they offer, that although they, as a junior school, they use more mature packages, it's a similar way of working. So that's been really key.
Now you did something, we were having a chat and we were talking about how concerned we were about the lost learning. We were concerned that when schools come back in September, there's going to be months and months where children have been at home, not doing the handwriting exercises. And we then, yourself, myself and Denise Meisner, we drafted an email which went out to every school in the United Kingdom, giving them our handwriting assessment teacher training for free. And that has been picked up by lots and lots of schools throughout the United Kingdom. Your school actually guides a cluster of schools on how to assess handwriting. It's not just the handwriting that we're looking at. We're looking at the potential barriers to writing well, flagging them up, and then once we flag them up, putting out that strategy for each child, and then sorting it out over the next year. Why do you think that those assessments, those sorts of assessments, are going to be so, those are going to be needed for this recovery?
I guess a lot of it's around individuality. Each school's different, each classroom's different, each cohort's different, every child's different. And so for a teacher, from March to July, they were working with families and children that they knew, that they had a relationship with. But when we come to September, for some of these teachers, they won't have met these children. They haven't got relationships with them. And so, in order for them to be able to get to know the children very, very quickly, they're going to need some support. And what I would rather the teachers do is spend time getting to know the families and the children as people, which means we're going to be, a good few weeks in before we start looking at academic assessments. As I've said, I want to ensure that children are emotionally ready to get back to learning before they start piling on any pressure. I mean, as a school, we try as little as possible to put any pressure on children at all around learning and testing in particular. We teach the children at the stage at which they're at. But to be able to have a tool that allows us to assess these children individually, it will really help. And so, I mean, we're a little bit behind because we've normally delivered our match fit assessments for handwriting in the summer term. So when we come back in September, our teachers are already, prepared for that. We thought it's a little step too far, really, to ask the parents to deliver those assessments at home. So we have waited until September, but those assessments will be delivered very easily. And the staff, with the knowledge that they already have through the CPD we did around handwriting, will be able to get those assessed pretty quickly and get individual plans in place alongside fine and gross motor planning as well. So for our Key Stage 1 children, they'll do match fit assessments to ensure that they're in a position to physically write. But for the younger children, who've been stuck at home really with no gross motor development because the parks have all been shut, very little fine motor development because parents, don't really realise the things that children need to do in order to develop the muscles in their fingers and their hands. We need to ensure that we pick up pace. And so for us, those sort of things around the actual physicality of writing rather than the content is really important in terms of catch up. Same with the reading, catching up with the phonics and making sure that parents are able to support us, because we're going to need to get children reading and they need the content that, you know, that they want to read, and we need parents with the knowledge of how to read. So catch-up programs aren't as simple as just delivering more and more learning in a classroom. You know, it's going to take a village to sort of raise these children back to where they would have been. And as I said earlier, it's really important that we cross-reference our CPD for parents, so that they understand what we're doing.
Fascinating. I mean, you created, when we worked on mini readers, mini Bs. Remember, we created mini Bs because we noticed from all the assessments, all the handwriting assessments, what was the one thing that kept coming up was fine and gross motor skills, core stamina, fine and gross motor skills. That was an alarm bell. It was just a red light that was flashing. So we worked on mini Bs, and you created the assessment for parents, teachers, and carers.
So it's always, every program we work on, every school improvement priority we have, there always is an element of parental support, to enable us to communicate with parents what we're doing, to enable parents to stay on board. And, you know, I'm not saying we have 100% of parents, but we have a higher percentage of parental support than many of our other local schools, because we work really hard in ensuring that they understand what we're doing, and that we do include them in that sort of CPD. So, you know, we're predicting that when we return in September, for a lot of our children, just really being able to sit on a chair and work is going to be hard work. Not just because of concentration and attention and the age of the children, but for the fact that physically, you know, they haven't been sitting at a desk, at a chair for a very long time, and they've not developed that skill. So for our year one children, we're actually delivering a reception curriculum for the first autumn term, and then we'll sort of build them up ready for January. For our year two children, there's going to be a lot of physical development work alongside their curriculum and alongside their emotional sort of curriculum. So I'm used to doing all of these things. I've been locked in a house.
What was very interesting, sorry Fiona, was that we had a top occupational therapist based in Florida in America. I'm hoping that Emma's actually going to deliver a talk as part of the virtual summit with us. And she was using mini Bs for her online, her teleconferencing, her tele lessons with all, because she's an occupational therapist, with all of her children that needed help during the lockdown there. And we met with 18 head teachers from USA, and they just said, we need this. We need these fine and gross motor skills. We need help. Please help us. And I think it was this constant thing of help. And everywhere I'm noticing around the world, teachers and head teachers are saying, can we help? How can we help? And I think that we have to get together. We have to all work together and assist each other and share best practice, share ideas, share concepts, anything that works. I mean, I'm still going to be bending your rubber arm, because Better Bears is one of the best programs, recovery programs I have ever seen. And I really do hope that we can make it available to schools. Perhaps, you know, we'll discuss it later, but it is so good, because not every school has a Fiona Cowan. It doesn't.
Thank the Lord.
Not every school has a team that can build programs and put them together in a way that they are easily accessible. You know,
and I think that's the difference, Mel, it is about a team approach. It's about, you know, communication and collaboration, and you know, we talked about that right at the beginning, but you go back to those same words of actually it's about the parents and the children and the teachers being a team, and that you ensure that by working in that triad of support, that everybody's ready and prepared. And so I couldn't, you know, we offer these programs that my staff have worked hours and hours on to make them individual to our school. And, you know, I think the uniqueness of some of these things is that they start as theory, and as research, but they very quickly develop into programs, and those programs can be taken by any school and adapted and developed for their situation, because every school, every child, every teacher is unique. And actually by empowering the staff and empowering the parents, you then empower the children to learn. And I think, you know, we certainly have seen that over lockdown, even though we work in that way already, that by supporting parents and empowering them, that will support children, and making sure that I as a manager empower my staff to empower our parents, to empower our children, and that all three work together, to create better futures. And hopefully when you get a chance to see the Better Bear video, you'll see that, that certainly is what happened through Better Bears, most definitely.
It's fantastic. Thank you, Fiona. We're going to be hearing lots more of you in the very near future, because I don't see this just stopping here with this summit. I think that a lot of schools are going to be getting in touch with us. There will be a document below this video with recommended resources, recommended reading, more information about Better Bears, more information about mini bees, mini readers, Start B assessment, early years assessment, parent training that Fiona's developed. Tons, there's tons. I mean, we're prolific. We don't sleep much. Look at these eyes, look at these eyes. Well, look at how pale I am. She's got a suntan. Anyway, thank you so very, very much for joining us. And we will see you all on the other side. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Bye-bye, Dan. Bye.